Hello and welcome to Say Hi to the Future, Ingenious Thinkers, a podcast aimed at highlighting the human side of ingenuity. With me today is Jessica Mshama, appointed the East African Community Youth Ambassador and youngest board member of the National Art Council of Tanzania. She advocates for inclusive economic policies across the region, emphasizing the importance of digital literacy and financial education for women and youth. Jessica, you're also part of Forbes Africa 30 Under 30, and you have been interviewed by the EU, UN, BBC, and more. It's just a pleasure to welcome you today.
Thank you so much for having me here today, Ken.
So, Jessica, I want to start out, so in one of your last talks, and ask you the question that you put out in your unofficial talk on how EU and UN can help find solutions to global problems. And you asked, who rules the world?
Correct.
What's your answer to that?
Well, it's a very diverse question. It's a very deep question as well. But the answer to that is everyone rules the world. Everyone gets to be part of ruling the world. And it's not really necessarily termed as a ruling, but impacting the world in everything that we do as human beings. So it's not out to leave the power left to certain organizations, but however, see how everybody contributes to the negotiations that are being made and plans for the future that has been made, and also to know how we can really have a positive impact out of everything that we do in our daily life.
So, Jessica, as I listen to that and I hear everybody, and I appreciate you said, everybody, it's not necessarily that everybody rules the world, but they have the opportunity to impact. And I love that because I think it's more than just a little tweak on it. But my guess is that not everybody has the ability to impact today, that there are a lot of voices that are not heard. So, how do we change that?
Well, going to that question, how do we change that? Based on my experience with the European Union External Action Service, EEAS, we had engaged in an online advocacy program called Our Voice, Our Future, where we get to hear the stories of so many youth across the world that are making positive impact, making changes on daily basis, having programs, projects that they advocate for the future. That's why we called Our Voice Our Future, because we got a chance to address the critical issues that are making our future. So in this campaign, we were able to reach a number of 150 million people because it was an online campaign with a hashtag of Our Voice Our Future. And through that, we got to see that so many unheard voices raising their voice and now coming out, empowering them to speak out to their leaders, even way before the Summit of the Future had begun. I remember it was 2022 where I engaged with the United Nations in the preparing for the Summit of the Future. And we got to hear the voices of young people during the sessions, and we got also to interview leaders on how they're making a youth to be part of this decision making. Because when you talk about the future, you talk about even the youth, that even the children that are at this age, they're going to be the youth of tomorrow. So you
Right.
should not neglect anybody when you talk about the future, and it should be more inclusive. And how are we going to do this? Is by collaborating and collecting all voices. I would suggest more of including local organizations that are making an impact from the grass level, because they're the ones who are really, first of all, living with the people, understanding their challenges. So when you talk about the bigger picture now, especially on the official development financial plans that majority get to play as are the Western world. We see developed worlds having more command, making decision of the global south or less development countries. But if we want to make a real significant and valuable future for all with the voices of all, we should not neglect the voices of the grassroots level organizations or community or systems, because they're the ones who are really facing the problems, and they know. I remember, for instance, I'm sorry I'm taking time replying
No,
this.
all good.
I remember, for instance, I wanted to advocate for youth economic empowerment, and I spoke to my father. My father is my hero. So I told my father that I want to make a forum, address each critical issues of economic empowerment, and I want to see how I can contribute to the youth in the local level, in the rural areas. And he told me one thing: before you go there with your decisions, with your mentality, with your opinions, try to directly engage them in asking them what do they need. Don't make for them rules, don't make for them your plans, but go straight directly to them, ask them, engage them. What do they really need to make a progressive life?
One, thank you for telling that story with fullness. You're more than welcome to here. And it's such an important one. Maybe I'm being cynical, but I've got to ask the question. So engaging the youth, the next generations to understand what they want almost seems like the simpler part of the equation. Engaging the policymakers, the politicians, to not just listen, but actually do something without massive lobbies. That seems to be the hardest part. Like, how do you manifest change?
Based on that, I would simply say is the challenge is to get youth voices to be heard. And
Mhm.
most of the time, the youth of our generation, we are waiting for people to speak on our behalf. I
Mhm.
would encourage young people who are confident, who are well trained and ready to serve for the community, to look for the spaces to be the leaders that we want them to be, to actually speak. Because for instance, if I stand in the parliament today and address critical issues of the youth, it will directly make sense because I'm young, I know what I have been dealing with, and I can really address the challenge that my peers are facing. So rather than to just wait for tables to be made, what if we make our own tables? What if we engage and simply say that no, it's our time for the world to hear us and to engage accordingly, because we can make a difference. Because when we talk about the global population right now, majority are youth. We cannot neglect that, especially in Africa.
Mhm.
So, what are the youth saying? For what are the youth preparing themselves to do? Is to create the tables, is to engage directly, and not necessarily to be the member of parliament. I understand the political dynamics and the political engagement can be complex at times, but then we youth should avail ourselves in the positions, different positions, starting from the lower level to the local government, in district meetings that they engage in their district. Let's not leave this equation for the elders, because time is not on our side. Soon or later, we're going to grow elder as well. And then we're going to tell our children, well, we wanted to do this and that, but we should take full responsibility at all levels to make the change.
I'm only chuckling because one of the two of us has already made his way to becoming elder or very close to that. So, and I'm only, again, say hi to the future is about bringing the voices out that you speak to. So I am so happy to be having this discussion with you, and to get some more of those voices out to the community. You wrote recently about climate change, and it knows no borders, and our efforts to combat it should be just as boundless. What is the shared responsibility, and what What might be happening in Africa that we don't know about?
Well, Africa, we're having revolution of technology, a mass of advanced technology, innovation. Companies are beginning to boom in Africa because we're aware of importance of quality education at the moment. Our governments are trying to invest in quality education, building schools, but also building capacity to facilitate, critical issues, research. A lot of researches are being conducted in Africa because we have, our land is prime. Our lands are virgin lands. We have sources of food, sources of minerals. We have a lot that is happening, and that critically needs innovation. So my statement that climate change has no border is because I wanted the world to face Africa as a continent that is reviving and understands what the world needs to make a change. And one of the pillars is investing in quality education, innovation, and creativity involving technology. And I
Hmm.
know it's a transition that will take time because mass of technology needs a lot of investments, especially now that we are dealing with space technologies that are advancing in communication, security, even agriculture. So we really need more partnership with developed countries or developed organizations so that we can pull these resources together with technology. And I believe if you're looking places to invest, I think the world has turned to Africa. And I would want everyone to also turn to Africa, especially now we're dealing with climate change issues. Again, Africa hasn't been on top of the continent that polluting the air. Let's say that
Hmm.
we no, Africa. It's still very virgin, as I say it. So having this knowledge and notions understandable to young people as us, it will give us the courage to be entrepreneurs that understand the critical issues that are going around the world, like climate issues, to be humanitarians that are aware as much as we need advancements in our continent, we should not neglect the problem of the world, like climate change. So that to me meant a world to see Africa in different view.
Jessica, what's a balance? Inviting the rest of the world in when you've seen what we've done to our own, well, not our own climates, because as you say, they are shared, but our climates, our landscapes. What is a balance for Africa? How do you learn from and monitor or regulate where we have gone wrong to ensure it doesn't, happen again?
We can assure this by being vulnerable, vulnerable to our community, vulnerable to what we're trying to invest, just to be conscious because whatever implication that climate crisis is having in Europe, let's say, in China or other part of the world, in one way or the other, we are going to have an effect of that. So how we should balance is by being considerate enough with the whole world, what is happening, and preparing for more suitable solutions.
What is sort of your role or your ambition in this? Is it political? Is it to be the voice of, like, is you're I'm just you're so knowledgeable and well spoken. I've never really sort of broken into an interview with this, but what's your future?
Well, thank you for the compliment. My future is to see the better future for everybody. Honestly, if I have the capacity to have a voice or to be maybe a political leader or to be a diplomat at any sphere, I want the world to be prepared for the future and not to leave anybody behind. For so long, part of the global south have been left out in so many ways. And
Hmm.
I don't wish to see the future having gaps like that. Because again, if in future, me or you, probably you would be in Africa, I would be in Europe. It doesn't change, right? We are all together. At the end of the day, we are all going to be connected. So we should be keen enough to prepare with titles, without titles. We should be we should be keen enough to be good citizens of the world. Yeah.
Well, thank you for that. You're a very impressive member of the youth, as you say, to speak with. Jessica, let's talk about entrepreneurship, because we've interviewed a number of entrepreneurs from Africa, and it seems to be one, it seems to be growing. Two, it seems to be critical to the future success of the continent. So, what do you see on entrepreneurship's role in Africa's economic development to be?
In Africa, economic development, when I see an aspect of entrepreneurship, I find it to be very reliable because majority of us, we have grown to see our mothers, our grandmothers, working hand in hand on small businesses. But again, time after time, these businesses, to me, I've seen them just been stagnant. Like you would find same business, a woman maybe is selling vegetables as a vendor, whatever. Um, the business, I would not find an inspiring story of that woman growing. And I searched what is the challenge that most of entrepreneurs face. But I found out that entrepreneurship is not really taught from the growing stage, maybe in public schools and private schools at times. So they're not aware of how even to grow their own businesses. Because we're not going to have a stable economy as a country if majority of the entrepreneurs are at the same level every time. So I would wish to see more empowerment on entrepreneurs, basically educational wise and financial education, which is very important. How to grow businesses? How does international trade occurs? What are the tariffs or customs that are helpful enough for countries between border to border? There's a lot of things that is going on, especially in Africa right now. We have African Free Continental Trade Agreement. I feel like African Free Continental Trade Agreement is going to be a hero of the continent because now you're talking about you're reaching out to the market of more than 1 billion people. So
Mm-hmm.
if you're reaching out to the market of 1 billion people, you need to prepare your entrepreneurs to know how to engage the market. Because if there are no preparation at the earliest stage, it means that it will be a revolution of the same critical issues in entrepreneurship that are going over and over again. Financial institutions charging high interest rates on small businesses, loans that are not empowering enough, and then taking advantage of these women and young girls who have no knowledge about. There's so many things that are happening in the economic system, focusing on entrepreneurship. And I feel like the government and the private sector has a lot to do in Africa for it to really have an impact in our lives.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I mean, I look, obviously I'm based in Canada and the North American ecosystem for entrepreneurs. It's not perfect, but it's very strong.
Yeah.
There are incubators or places where an entrepreneur can go and discuss and build and grow their idea, learn about financing. There are banks that focus on um, entrepreneurial loans, many backed by government guarantees to help support you, to regulate the interest rates, obviously. Um, where is Africa? Because I think you're absolutely right. It's going to be very hard to grow and develop an entrepreneurial ecosystem the way that you want without those supports for each entrepreneur. So where is Africa now on that curve? Is it
Well,
started? Or?
well, as I said, we have from African perspective, we have African Free Continental Trade Agreements, where countries have come together to reduce all the barriers that have been um, on international trade, moving goods from one country to another. I can see East African community booming actually, because through that we see how the East African countries are doing trade together. We see how maybe, let's say, Kenya is dependent so much on Tanzania in food products, and so many materials that are also dependent to Tanzania from Kenya. So we can see the boundaries that are being reduced between the countries. And I feel like with those kind of negotiations between region negotiations, like in ECOWAS, when you talk about Southern African countries, SADC, when you talk about East African community, I feel this type of agreements are the ones that are really going to enhance changes in our community. And also, leave alone that, but infrastructures. We have now the longest railway in Africa, um, in, in Tanzania, SGR. So movement of people is movement of trade. So to that, I would really like to applaud our leaders on that. But then we as citizens, we also have to be really ready for it so that we can see the benefits of it. As I said earlier, we need to educate ourselves. We need to conduct e-commerce businesses. Digitalizations in business sector is really important. Now we can sell our products online, but leave alone that, we need to understand the dynamics of the business economic systems. There's a lot that we need to prepare for,
Right.
especially being as the developing countries. We didn't get to learn all this in school. So we need to learn and adapt as we're growing. Yeah.
Absolutely. And again, another great insight because, yeah, whether you learn in school or through, again, what we call incubators or use as incubators, yeah, some fundamentals from people who've done it are super, super critical. And I say that I teach entrepreneurship in different schools right now. And it kind of opens people's eyes, not just to being an entrepreneur, but to asking better questions if you're working in a larger company,
Yeah.
like questions that will push that company to be more innovative. So that type of education, yeah, I'm kind of on board with. Jessica, the time is going quickly, but I want to ask a few more questions about you. Not specific to business so much as maybe some of your passions, because I see you're the youngest board member of the National Art Council of Tanzania. So how does that come about?
Well, it's an exciting journey. Honestly speaking, I am really humbled and thankful to my president for allowing this appointment to come through, because, I've been singing apart from doing business and, advocacy. I have been singing with my sisters at a very young age, ever since I was 7 years old. So I have like 15 years and plus years in music industry. And to be appreciated and to be recognized to a point of being a board member, to me it's a very emotional title, and I'm really happy about it. But more than that, I'm happy that I'm making critical decisions, opinions on how we can grow the music industry in our country, which is really critical. And not only growing, but then we're talking about art and culture. How can we advance culture to the artistic world and tell the world that, we have our music, yes, but we have a culture in that music, and that brings, positive vibes in the community, that brings energy, that promotes prosperity and unity. So I'm really happy to be with my several board members as well, who have expertise in different areas. So to me, it's a very high moment for me to learn and engage and make actually uh, good changes in the music industry. And through this, I can see our music industry is growing. Our artists are getting global awards, Grammy nominated nominations. So I'm glad what I do in that aspect.
Well, good. And I see too, you have quite a few songs and performances on YouTube. So I hope that some listeners will venture to YouTube and have a listen to you.
Yeah, hopefully. Thank you.
So Jessica Mshama, it's been an absolute pleasure. You are a member of Forbes Africa 30 under 30. That's about as impressive as it gets. You are also East African Community Youth Ambassador and the youngest board member of National Art Council of Tanzania. Just again, kudos for what you're doing
Thank you.
and helping to make a better world, not just for Africa, but for youth in general.
Thank you so much.
Take care.